Okay, this lesson is going to be about how to use commas. And when I say how to use commas, I'm talking about the advanced skills that can either give you more points or take them away on the IELTS or the TOEFL essay. So just to review a little bit, commas are used for lists. For example, I may say, I want to buy bread, butter, milk, and yogurt. So I put a comma after each item if there are 3 or more items. So bread, comma, butter, comma, milk, and yogurt. In American English, we use commas for dates. For example, January 5th, comma, 2014. We use them for addresses. I might say, I live at 123 Elm Street, Los Angeles, comma, California, and the zip code 90039. Now, often on the IELTS, and it could even be on the TOEFL, but I think more on the IELTS, sometimes they ask you to write a letter. So don't forget that after the greeting and the closing in a letter, there's a comma. So you might say, Dear Emma, comma, I am writing to ask you to finish your report, etc. Regards, comma, Catherine. Okay, so after a greeting and after a closing, we use a comma. Now, here are the more advanced skills you need for the IELTS and TOEFL. Using commas to connect 2 independent clauses. Remember that an independent clause is a group of words that has a subject and a verb that can stand on its own. Essentially, an independent clause is just a complete sentence. For example, I ran down the street. Okay, that's a complete sentence. It's also an independent clause. They're really the same thing. Now, in English, if you want to connect 2 independent clauses to make a longer, more elaborate sentence, you have to use a comma and a conjunction. Now, the way to remember what the conjunctions are in English is to use this mnemonic device, fanboys. Fanboys. It stands for all of the coordinating conjunctions that you may need. For example, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Each of these conjunctions are always preceded by a comma. And you can see that right here. I forgot to put a comma between or and yet. So here's an example of a mistake. And if I were to do this on the test, I would lose some points. I wouldn't fail, but I would lose some points. So there should be a comma right here between or and yet. All right, here's an example. Sherry went to Rome, but she did not see the Vatican. All right, so right before the conjunction but, I put the comma. All right, let's practice. The first example I'm going to give you is incorrect. We went to the store, but we did not buy anything. Well, it sounds okay if you read it, because that is sort of how we speak. However, in writing, you have to have the comma just before the conjunction. So that's why I put this arrow here. So the correct way to write this would be, we went to the store, comma, but we did not buy anything. Okay, now, in my experience, the second most common mistake students make when they're writing English is to do something called the comma splice. A comma splice happens when you use the comma, but you don't add the conjunction that you need to go with it. We call this a comma splice. If you do this on the IELTS or the TOEFL, you're going to lose points, because it shows that you don't understand how to use a comma or how to use the conjunctions. So it's critical that you practice this and you do not make this mistake. Or if you do, don't make it that often, right? Okay. Again, a comma splice is when you try to connect 2 independent clauses with a comma only. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Sherry went to Rome. She did not see the Vatican. I cannot tell you how common this type of mistake is. I've been teaching for 25 years, and even after the lessons and after practice, students still do this. So even if you think you don't make this mistake, I can guarantee that you probably do. Be careful. The correct way to write this sentence is, Sherry went to Rome, comma, but she did not see the Vatican. Don't forget that you have to add this conjunction here. You cannot just say, Sherry went to Rome, she did not see the Vatican. No. 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 Don't do it. You're going to lose points. Okay. Now, let's talk about how you can fix a comma splice. I've already explained one way to do this, and this is to add a comma and a fanboy conjunction. Remember that fanboy stands for the conjunctions for, and, nor, but, or, yet. Any of those. This is the easiest way to avoid this mistake. Okay, now, there is another way that you can avoid a comma splice. And this is more sophisticated, and it's a higher level skill. And if you can do this without making a mistake, you are going to get up into the 30-point level for the TOEFL or the band 9 level for the IELTS. This is what they're looking for, this kind of sophistication. You can make a subordinating clause. A subordinating clause is a clause or a group of words that cannot stand alone. They need to be connected to something. So you can make a subordinating clause by adding a subordinating conjunction such as since, although, while, when, because. These are what we call subordinating conjunctions, and they're different from the fanboy conjunctions. So you have fanboy conjunctions and you have subordinating conjunctions. So here's an example. Although Sherry went to Rome, comma, she did not see the Vatican. In this example, my subordinating clause is the first clause. Although Sherry went to Rome, if I were only to say this to you and nothing else, you would wonder, yeah, what about it? So what? Because it's not a complete thought. So you have to have the comma here. Although Sherry went to Rome, she did not see the Vatican. Now, the other way to write this is to start off by putting the independent sentence or independent clause. Sherry went to Rome, although she did not see the Vatican. Both of these are correct ways that you can avoid a comma splice by using a subordinating clause and a subordinating conjunction.